and welcome to episode 25 of the Bishop on a Bike podcast. This episode, we're talking with Grace Pomroy, who works for Portico Benefit Services. And I know a lot of you are thinking, Portico, don't they do health insurance? What's the deal with that? Yes, they do, but Portico also does retirement and financial planning. And Grace is a 30-something person that works for them. Forgot her title, we'll look it up. Anyway, I talked with Grace by Skype about financial planning, about retirement, about what young people in the ministry should do in terms of planning, and we also talk about the new FIRE movement that's been going on and quite popular these days. A brief apology for the sound quality of this episode. We had some technical difficulties that we just could not survive. But it's the best we could do, so there is a bit of an echo in this recording, but I still think it's worthwhile. This is the last episode of the first season for the Bishop on a Bike podcast. We will be taking a small break here, but coming back in another 4 weeks, I would say, with a whole new series of episodes for calendar year 2019, if you're listening to this out into the future. Once again, I want to thank the Mission Investment Fund for their sponsorship of this podcast and the blog, bishoponabike.com. for this year 2018. They have been great partners, and I appreciate their generosity in helping all the technical stuff to happen here. So let's get to our conversation with Grace Pomroy of Portico Benefit Services.
No, I didn't. So I grew up of God. That was the church that I was in from when I was born. My parents actually met in the church that I grew up in and raised me in that church until I was 18 and went off to college. I found out about the Lutheran Church kind of through a backwards way. I went to St. Olaf College because of their music program and their theology program and thought, hey, Lutherans, I don't know much about them, but I think it'd be interesting to learn more. It's kind of surprising though when you think about it, because I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, so I should have known Lutherans, but I didn't know any. I didn't grow up with any. I wasn't familiar. So I went to St. Olaf and really became a Lutheran through having really great relationships with other Lutheran folks on campus, and then working at Sugar Creek Bible Camp in Berryville, Wisconsin. And learning about Lutheran theology through having to teach it to kids is a really great way to get a primer for yourself. And it was just a phenomenal experience. And camp was really a big shaper in my faith in so many facets, and went from working at a camp to seminary. And seminary is actually where I first found out about stewardship. I always like to say I kind of accidentally came upon stewardship because I needed a job as a student on campus and found out they needed someone at the Center for Stewardship Leaders, didn't have any idea what stewardship meant, knew about tithing from my background, knew about giving, knew about offerings, but not about stewardship. And so as I kind of listened and learned more about this job, it was about kind of editing and reading materials and doing a little bit of work. And I thought, hey, why not? I'll take them up on this offer, see what this is all about. Ended up getting a 30-minute stewardship sermon as my interview. I don't think I got one question at all. And I was so enthralled. I think most people want to run from the hills, but for me, having worked at a Bible camp the past summer and really working in with creation stewardship, talking a lot about giving and generosity, it was something I had been learning about and living into all my life that I could never put words to. And so, unlike most people who have really kind of old tapes or some bad thoughts about stewardship, for me, it's always been positive. It's always been grounded in a really organic experience of what it's like to be a generous disciple of Christ.
So you put a bunch of things together that a lot of people don't put together. Let's unpack a couple of those, because one of the things you said, you had grown up in this tradition about tithing, but you'd never learned about stewardship. Mm-hmm. And then you also talked about generosity. And so let's unpack all of those different pieces, because I think that that's a really, most people clump it all together, and it's usually 3 weeks in October, November, and we do our stewardship drive, which sounds like something that we would do for NPR, like a pledge drive. But you're really trying to expand this whole thing. So first of all, tell me about, so how do you define those? How do you separate out each of those pieces?
Sure. Actually, I'm going to have you hold on just a second because I think my email keeps making noises and I don't want you to hear it on your end. There's a good way to get that going for you. Done. Awesome. So now I'm back. Yeah, so for me, unpacking that a bit, in the tradition that I grew up in, tithing was a word that was mentioned often. Tithing meaning 10%. And while certain people have tried to come against me over the years to ask if people really did that in my tradition, at least as a child growing up, it was my experience that people actually did tithe. And they were very generous, and offerings meant anything above the tithe. And so giving and generosity and giving to organizations was something talked about all the time. There was constantly, or other organizations outside the church that were being brought in, and we were invited to give, and the kids were invited to give. So giving was a big part of the culture, but they never used the word steward or stewardship. It just wasn't a word that they would use to describe it. I don't think we ever had a stewardship team. We probably had a generosity or a finance team that sort of acted like a stewardship team. It just wasn't something that was really discussed in that manner. And so for me, when I heard the word, I knew some Bible verses that had steward associated with it. So I kind of had an idea of what it was, but I didn't know about this whole culture around this word stewardship. So that's kind of what I would describe as kind of a learning of a new word or a new language for what I've been talking about. That being said, I think the word stewardship in the Lutheran tradition gathered together for me so many different things under one umbrella. While the church I grew up in certainly talked a lot about giving and generosity in a very traditional biblical sense, they didn't often tie in the discipleship factor.
Okay,
and for me, that's one of the vital parts.
What's that discipleship piece in that? That's because I think that's, for Lutherans, they just kind of hear the word stewardship and glaze over, and they think, essentially, most Lutherans think stewardship the way you were brought up with talking about generosity and tithing. It's just one thing.
Well, I would say Lutherans think about stewardship without tithing.
Well, that's true.
Tithing comes up so minimally, which was something that was really shocking to me, actually, when I came to the Lutheran tradition. I was just like, oh, we're not going to talk about that? That's not really a thing. And I have obviously evolved my views on that over the years, but I mean, when I was growing up, that was part of who you were. I mean, if you were a Christian, you tithed, and you actually did all 10% to the church.
Mm-hmm. And so now when you use the word stewardship, and in Lutheran circles, so it includes generosity. What else does it include?
Oh, it includes so much. I mean, I think stewardship, I saw a logo a couple years back where it was stewardship is discipleship is stewardship, and it just goes around in this big logo because it's about how we live our lives as Christians, but it comes down, I think, to the way we handle the resources that God has entrusted to our care. These are not our resources, they're God's resources, and we have the wonderful experience of being able to steward those or manage those wisely. For me, stewardship comes down to how we live out our love of God and neighbor through that resource management process.
Interesting.
And resources is not like necessarily even tangible resources. They're things like a story. They're things like the gospel story. They're things like privilege. I mean, there's so much one can unpack there that if we just leave it to money, if we just leave it to the traditional kids sermon of here's 10 M&Ms, give one to the church and the other 90 belong to you, we've just completely missed out. It's about how we handle all of this in all of our life all the time. And the church is actually just one aspect of stewardship.
Right. So even how I choose to eat.
Exactly.
An expression of stewardship / discipleship. How I choose to invest my money, where I choose to save it, how I take care of my body is also stewardship. So,
exactly.
Yeah. So you're working with Portico in this area, but before we go there, you've written a book along with Chuck Lane, who wrote what is, I think, the classic in the field in terms of Ask, Thank, Tell. I just love that book. And you and he combined to get together. It's kind of the new version. It's like a new version of Ask, Thank, Tell. You've incorporated a lot of the original book, but you've added some different things. How did that come about? How did you and Chick start to work together?
Absolutely. So we worked together in the Center for Stewardship Leaders, where I worked as a seminary student. He likes to joke that he inherited me as his staff member because I was already hired and the older person retired. He came on board and he was forced to keep me whether he liked me or not. And over time, we became very good colleagues and also friends. I think we originally started out kind of mentor-mentee and quickly learned that we had a lot to learn from one another, not just a one-way street. And that's why we wanted to write the book. We wanted to share what you can learn from intergenerational stewardship relationships. That in fact, we have a lot more in common than we have dividing us. Although some of those things that are dividing us are important to be attentive to. The way we communicate, what motivates us to give, those things are really important to be attentive to. So we wrote the book really for ourselves as an expression of our relationship, but also to be able to share with others and have found that effective. The book has 12 chapters. It's very easy to read as a stewardship committee or team. Starts out with some really great grounding on what stewardship is about, and then 8 ideas. Take one, take all 8, and put them into practice in your congregation. And through each chapter, we alternate who's writing the chapter, and then the person who isn't writing gives a response through their own perspective and lens.
Mm-hmm. And talk to me a little bit about the generational piece of this. You said that because that's one of the things that intrigues me. I think there's a lot of wisdom. I used to say there's a lot of wisdom on the part of my older generation, what would be my grandparents. But now I'm also kind of finding some wisdom on the younger generation, which I want to talk about a little bit. So first of all, the name of the book is Embracing Stewardship. Is that the title?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what's the generational pieces that you're learning?
Absolutely. So Chick and I are, depending on the time of year, 40 or 39 years apart. So it depends on which time of year he's most happiest, usually at the 39-year mark. But we have a huge age difference. And yet, as we were having conversations about stewardship, working in a small office together, back to back, we learned a lot. We learned a lot about some things that are the same. We both give because of duty and delight. We both find giving to the church to be a high priority in our life in terms of the way we budget. And in fact, when we were working together, we each gave the same percentage to our church and many other organizations. However, the amount might be a little bit different. I was just starting out in my career, and he was near the end of his career. So you might imagine the amount of money might be a little bit different. Percentage-wise, we're pretty much the same. That being said, the reasons why we gave were a little bit different. We both had duty and delight in mind, but for me, the mission of the organization matters a lot more. It also matters how you are making a tangible difference. Right. One thing that matters more to Chick as a baby boomer and his generation in general is kind of that history legacy piece. A little bit more of the institutional lens is important to some of those folks, whereas for me, the cause lens is vital. Your history and your legacy is wonderful, but if you're not still living that out today, then that's vitally important for me. And this is really key when we're talking about congregations, because so many congregations I know just want to rest on their laurels. They want to tell you the story of 50 years ago and how great they were and hope that someday they can be that great again. When in fact, what I really want to hear about is, what is that ministry you're doing today? Why does it matter? And how is my money that I'm going to give going to contribute to that? Because I think there are so many wonderful Christian organizations to give to, and so many great causes where the Spirit is moving outside of the four walls of the congregation. So it's really important that we know how this money is going to good use, not just maintaining an institution.
I think that that's a really nice summary of kind of the generational divide. You really need to have both in your stewardship communication, if you will. Well, not just in your communication, as you're actually living it out. You need to be making a difference right now. And then for other folks, having that institutional connection is important. But let's also talk about the generational differences beyond stewardship, just in terms of how older generations deal with money or think about money versus younger generations think about money. One of the things that I've noticed is people who, excuse me, people who are older tend to be more conservative, and I don't mean that in a political sense. I mean that more in like a conserving approach, very cognizant of maybe if they're retired, no longer having, opportunities to get additional money in terms of additional work or something like that. So that kind of framework of thinking about money is different than, say, somebody that's in their 20s, 30s, or even 40s or 50s for that matter. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I always like to try to distinguish between what is related to age and what is related to a generation. And I think what you were talking about is very related to age, especially in my role at Portico as a financial educator. To be frank, I'm often working with people who are nearing retirement, which is so much fun. But as people get closer to retirement, that's often the mentality they're going for is, do I have enough money? Am I going to make it? One thing that Chick talks about often now that he's a retired person is how many people will say, oh, I'm retired, I'm living on a fixed income, which means to say, don't ask me for anything more because I've already got it budgeted and I'm just not sure if I'm going to have enough. And yet, we're all living on a fixed income all the time. It's called a salary. Right. We all have a fixed income situation. And it's just the way in which we see that fixed income situation that's a little bit different. Now, that isn't to say that there are folks who are retired who are not living paycheck to paycheck in terms of their Social Security check. That's absolutely the case. But many folks have kind of more of a scarcity mindset as they're going into retirement. So I would definitely say that I see that too. The other thing that I see that's incredibly prominent is that folks of the millennial generation, I don't think that this is an age thing, but I could be wrong, are way more willing to talk about money and money's role in their life than folks that are older. That money taboo just isn't there as much for them, and they're really eager to have conversation with friends, family, and even just folks that they haven't met before. I mean, they're really curious to learn more.
I agree. That is definitely something I have noticed. Much more willingness to engage on the topic of money. It's not taboo. It's part of general conversation. It'd be interesting to talk about why that is, but and I don't know if anybody's figured that out, but well, I think for millennials, a lot of folks came of age around 2008, and so therefore they experienced the Great Recession, and that therefore brought it right to the fore. Although people that went through the Depression era, they don't like to talk about money, so that I don't know if that's what it is, but it is fascinating. Now, go ahead.
Oh, go for it.
I was going to ask, one of the things, so you have a blog, and in relation to this question about money talk, you're pretty open about talking about it. But one of the themes I've noticed that you and other people blog or podcast about is frugality is now seen as a value. As opposed, and I think it was a value that was held up by the Depression era folks, but baby boomers, they don't want to hear anything about frugality because they grew up in the exploding economy.
I get what you're saying. It's interesting that you say that, though, to be honest, because a lot of people who follow my blog are baby boomers. So maybe there's some closeted frugalistas out there who are really wanting to live into it. Who knows? Yeah, absolutely. I think the word frugal has changed a lot. I think the way it was used in the Depression was kind of a nicer way to say that we're going to be cheap and we're living into a model of scarcity. And in fact, what I think frugal is about today is really tracking well with the minimalist movement to say, here's the amount of money that I have. I want to make sure that I'm using it well. I want to make sure that I'm sharing, saving, and spending with intention. That each thing that I'm spending, saving, and sharing, I'm really putting my mind to work to make sure that this is connected with my values and not just spending superfluously or saving or sharing gratuitously. I don't think it's just about overspending. It's certainly about being cognizant of all the choices that you're making in your life.
Now, how did you get onto this path, this minimalism, Christian stewardship? I mean, obviously you've got those faith formation things, but a lot of people have those and don't necessarily. What's the connector for you in this whole area?
It was all about seminary for me, to be honest. I often joke with people I became a financial educator because I went to seminary, which is really not an A to B track that anybody seems to quite understand. But for me, working in the Center for Stewardship Leaders and working with a financial coach my first year at seminary opened up a whole world of experience for me to see money differently and to see it come to life, that even as a seminary student with limited funds, I could still make a difference in the world with my giving. I could still save and build an emergency fund, and I could still spend with intention. So going out with friends and having relationships, being able to have people over for dinner was important to me. I could still do all of those things even within a limited budget. And I saw money as something not as a barrier to the things that I wanted in my life, but as a tool that allowed me to be able to live some of those dreams and, in fact, even be able to live out my mission as a disciple in a better way.
Interesting. Wow. And so along the way, were there any particular resources that you learned about or that you've learned of since that, you know, somebody who's listening to this and going, yeah, this is an area I really want to learn more about, where would they go?
Yeah, so we've already mentioned a few really good ones. You mentioned Chick's book and, of course, our book, but I would say if you want to delve into kind of money's relationship, a couple of places I would go is, one, all of the resources by Nathan Dungan I feel are just really solid, especially if you want to talk about money as a family. It's a great place to start, and he is the leader of Share, Save, Spend. The other place that I would go is to Lynn Twist's book, The Soul of Money. I cannot say enough great things about that book. It transformed the way that I see my money, something I read early on in seminary, and it's kind of formed my theology of money without ever saying God once in the entire book. It's really quite a spiritual book and spiritual experience, and allows you to see money through the lens of abundance and not scarcity.
So that was Lynn Twist, Twist.
And Lynn with two N's and an E, I believe.
Okay, so Lynn Twist, The Soul of Money. And I know somebody that loves that book and has told me about it, but I've not read that one. Nathan, though, is, what was the last name?
Dungan, Dungan.
And that's completely new information. Would say more about Nathan and that work.
Absolutely. So Nathan works here in Minneapolis. That's where I'm calling him from. And he is someone who's worked in the financial industry for a long time. He's a certified financial planner and has done some great work in helping parents explain money to their kids in a really sustainable way and actually have conversations about money at the dinner table, about money when you're out shopping, thinking about allowances differently. He's got video resources, he's got books, and he's also, of course, written for a variety of magazines. I just find what he's working on is really helping us to unpack what it means to live with money, sharing, saving, and spending, not just seeing spending as the enemy of our sharing and our saving.
Oh, interesting. No, that's good. That's good. And your work at Portico. Let's touch on that before we end this. What I know what you do because I just got to sit on one of your presentations. But what is your work with Portico?
So I often joke with people that my job is to teach pastors how to retire, which is incredibly challenging and also incredibly exciting, especially if someone has a seminary degree. I love walking beside ministry leaders, whether they are ordained, consecrated, or just in a lay ministry capacity like myself. It's just fun to see them grow and develop and learn more about money. I know from being in seminary, while I learned a lot about money in seminary, many of my peers did not. And so it's really helpful for them to think about their own financial well-being, especially as they have their roles in the church, doing stewardship ministry, even some work with the budget and finance, and hopefully preaching on money as it comes up a whole heck of a lot in the lectionary. So helping people really engage with their own finances is really my job. And I serve members of all ages, but often end up focusing most on our folks getting close to retirement because they tend to ask for the most resources and need a little bit more assistance as they make that transition.
That's great. That's great. And if people want to learn more about what you do, I know you have a blog. You want to share that contact and that blog information? And
Yeah, absolutely. So my blog is gracepomroy.com. That's GracePomroy.com. And on that blog, I share my own experiences in helping you make money your friend in life, work, and love. And I also do some coaching and speaking. You can find more information there.
Yeah, and you are a great speaker. So if anybody's listening to this and looking for somebody to speak, well, this has been great. Thank you so much for this conversation. I thought we would end with something fun. I don't know if you're familiar with these. These are Money Talk cards by Vicki Robbins.
Nice. I'm not familiar. That's awesome.
So Vicki Robbins and Joe Dominguez wrote the book Your Money or Your Life, which was 1993. She's just come out with a new version of it. And she put together these cards. It's basically a set of playing cards, and you can use them in a number of different ways. I thought we would each draw one and answer the question.
I love it. Let's do it.
So you want to pick one, even though it's over several thousand miles, and we'll just kind of pull one out from here, and I'll read you yours, and then I'll read mine. And then what does financial independence mean to you? So that's your question. You can think about that for a second. What does financial independence mean for you? And the next one is, what was something you used up? What was something you used up? Anyway, so I'll think about that for a second. What does financial independence mean to you, Grace Pomroy?
All right, so I have to say the first thing that came to mind for me as a 31-year-old is the fact that I'm very grateful that I'm no longer dependent on my parents' bank account. That's so kind of first level of financial independence. But I think the second piece of it is really important. I think so many times folks think about financial independence as me or me and my spouse standing alone against the world. No matter what comes at us, we can handle it. And I don't really know that that's the best perspective. I think financial independence is a place where, yes, you feel sustained from those various small emergencies that might come your way, and you're willing to share with others, and know that there might be a point in time that others have to share with you. I think financial interdependence is actually a better lens than financial independence sometimes.
Interesting. I like that. Well, what comes to mind is something that I used up recently. Is about not quite a year ago, my wife and I sold this car that we had driven to almost 300,000 miles, and it was a Toyota Yaris, which was a very, very small car. It was my car for a long, long time, and then my wife. But so that we drove that virtually into the ground, but not quite. Just in time before driving it into the ground, I sold it to one of our pastors in the synod. But she then gave it to her son. So it is going on. So that's as close to something that I've completely used up. I think the idea behind the question is, what's something you've gotten a lot of use out of? So, well, thanks. This was a really fun conversation. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Bishop. It's so much fun to chat with you, and I hope you guys enjoy the segment.
Thank you.